when that happens. Excellent. Brilliant. All right, so we are now recording. So again, we'll have time for questions and answers at the end. But if you don't want your questions and answers to be in the recording, we'll cut the recording after the end of the presentation. Fantastic. All right, so to officially kick off, my name is Rachel Scully. I am the Dignity, Respect and Consent Service Manager. And what we're going to talk about today is how we look at managing our disclosures and reports of bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct that come into yourselves in your roles of as society committees. And we're also going to look at how we can best help you as a service. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of a history and a background in terms of our service and what we do. So our role is to provide training and support to all staff, all students, and a category called others. So others in this could be potentially, so they're members of our community who aren't necessarily explicitly staff or explicitly students. So they would be the likes of some third-party service providers. So say we have some security who are, work with us through Bidvest Noonan. We have visiting lecturers who are coming in from, and academics who are coming in from other institutions to work with us here for a short period of time. But even it could include the likes of tourists or people coming onto campus for whatever reason. So that's the scope of who we deal with in the course of our work. And then we do that across all areas of bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct. So I'm going to go through the definitions of bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct in a little bit more detail in a little minute. And I suppose just to stay within that, we're going to focus primarily today on kind of a more process side of the house, as opposed to getting into the specifics of responding to and supporting individuals who have experienced bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct. We will be offering more in-depth training over the course of the year, and we'll give you more information on that through the CSC when that becomes available. So we do the work that we do under two key pillars. So that's our prevention pillar and our response pillar. So prevention is kind of what it says on the tin. It's training and awareness raising across the whole of the college community in the hopes of kind of changing our culture and changing our behaviours, where we really kind of stamp out bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct. And that's the goal there. And then in our response, that's where we have our advisory service, and that service is available to all staff and students and others. And we do that through kind of appointments and working through the processes really as set out in the policies. And that is for where there are instances of bullying, harassment and sexual misconduct. But the hope is that if we can do a really good job of that preventative work, but then also when we do have a good response to those who have experienced any form of the bullying, harassment or sexual misconduct, then we will move into and hopefully create and foster this positive, safe and inclusive culture. And that really is our key goal as a service, is to help create a positive, safe and inclusive culture for everyone within our community. So to go through our definitions, now you don't need to know these definitions off by heart. But the key things here are, with bullying, it is repeated inappropriate behavior. So it can be direct or indirect, verbal, physical, otherwise online, in person, that, it can kind of take place in any different forum, but it has to be repeated inappropriate behavior. So as we see here, an isolated incident may be an affront to dignity, but it wouldn't be considered bullying as per our definitions. Then when we have harassment, so harassment can be a once-off incident, but it must be on one of the equality grounds. So they are gender, civil status, family status, sexual orientation, religion, age, disability, race, and membership of the traveller community. I suppose a caveat here in terms of the language that we're using. So race is used as kind of an umbrella term within the policy, but it does include ethnicity and nationality within there as well. So our kind of key differences here are that bullying doesn't have to be on one of the 9 grounds. It can be on any basis, but it has to be repeated behaviour. And then harassment can be a once-off, but it has to be on the basis of one of the 9 grounds or equality grounds as set out in legislation. I'm now going to move on to our definition of sexual misconduct. So sexual misconduct, again, it can be a once-off, it can be multiple. There's no, I suppose, caveats within that in terms of the number of instances, but it has to be inappropriate and unwanted behaviors of a sexual nature. So it's the sexual nature of the inappropriate and unwanted behavior that determines it as sexual misconduct. Before I move on, can I ask if anyone has questions on any of those definitions? Are they okay? Great. I will take silence as okay and move on that there are no questions. Perfect. Great. So I'm going to talk through now our advisory service piece and what that kind of looks like. So this is again in our response section. So this is where an individual may have experienced, perpetrated, witnessed, or responds to negative behavior. And the key here is that they wish to seek advice. Again, another caveat in terms of our language on this piece, when we use the term perpetrate in this section and when it's related to a process, we are only using that in an instance where an individual has self-disclosed that they believe that they have perpetrated some form of negative behavior. If a complaint is made about another individual or made against another individual, they would fall under the response to category, and we would not use the term perpetrates when we're referring to them, or perpetrator when we're referring to them. We would use kind of responding person or respondent within that. And that's kind of to do with our kind of principles of natural justice, which I'll speak to again in another little bit. But again, because it hasn't gone through a process, when it's in this space, we cannot use the term perpetrator. So the key piece here is that any of these individuals wish to seek advice. And again, it is totally their choice if they wish to come in and see us, and if they wish to seek advice on what kind of resolution options are available for them. So they can then book an appointment, an intake appointment with ourselves. There's a booking form on our website. We'll be sending these slides out afterwards, and you can kind of get access to the booking form there. Then you have the option to attend the appointment either in person or online. Again, it's just dependent on your own personal preferences. So if in person is preferable, that's fantastic. Or if you prefer to be at home, absolutely no bother. So as we're conscious that a lot of individuals don't necessarily have a space at home where it's comfortable for them to do, to have these kinds of conversations and to disclose about their experiences. But also, you know, maybe an in-person may not feel comfortable for someone and they would like to have that kind of that little bit of distance and security in online. Again, whichever is preferable for the individual. And then at that appointment, you will be able to explore the next steps in terms of your resolution processes and the different support services that are available with your dedicated D&C advisor. So in terms of those options, there's the kind of 4 key options that generally our appointments fall under. So option 1 would be our disclosure only. So if an individual just wants to come in, and sometimes it's enough for someone to be able to have a space where they can speak out loud and talk through their experience with another person, and just have that opportunity to say, you know, this is what's happened, this is what I've experienced, and that's absolutely fine. And we can hold the space with that person. And if that's all they want, that's fine. Our option 2 is that we could potentially help them access relevant support services. So again, as we know, there's a huge number of support services available, both internally in the college and externally to the college. And sometimes it can be really challenging to figure out what's actually the best option for you. So what we can do is listen and understand what your experience is and what kind of supports you need, and we can help figure out what's the most relevant support service. So that might be, say, the counselling service, it may be your tutor, it could be the CSC, it could be potentially the postgrad advisory service. You know, there's a lot of different options even within the university that we are not always aware of. It could also potentially be sometimes accessing external support services can be challenging, and it can feel kind of daunting to take that step, or to feel like, yeah, that is the right place for me to go, and it's okay for me to ask help from them. So again, we can look at helping access external supports as well. Then our option 3 and our option 4 are really where we come into that kind of like policy process space. So when we look at our informal options, and again, you don't need to know huge amount of detail in terms of what these are. They are very clearly stated within the policies, and there is a very, very clear process in terms of what has to be followed when engaging in this. But in, say, for example, one of the informal options could be, having a direct conversation with the person who's causing concern. And what that might look like is, you're experiencing some form of negative behavior. It could be bullying, harassment, sexual misconduct, and you want to have a conversation. You want to draw attention to the other person, the person causing concern, about the impact of their behavior. And that can be a really hard conversation to have, when you are just kind of going, okay, well, I want to go talk to this person and tell them the impact of their behavior on me. So what we can do is we can chat through, what that might look like, what that might feel like, what kind of ways you might broach that conversation, and have a little bit of a practice, have a little bit of a test run to see, how that works, before you go ahead and do that. So again, just trying to provide support for individuals in terms of that type of resolution. Within that, we would also then have, say, an informal conversation with a college officer, a facilitated conversation, or mediation are some of the other options within there, and that's all detailed in the policies. And then option 4 are our formal options, and this is really moving into kind of an investigative space. I guess one of the key things in that is, so it comes all kind of complaints under the dignity and respect policy and the sexual misconduct policy get channeled in through our office, and they go through a screening process, and then the investigation will either be managed and convened by the Office of the Junior Dean, or our employee relations team over in human resources. And how we determine who will be convening that investigation is on the basis of who the respondent is. So the respondent is the person who a complaint is made about. So if that person is a member of staff, it would go over to our employee relations team. If that person is a student, it would go to the Office of the Junior Dean. And the reason for this is the investigation has to be convened by the department who has jurisdiction to impose a sanction. And that really is kind of what governs how we do that. Does that all make sense? Does anyone have questions? I can't see people, but thumbs up if that's okay. If you have any questions, you can either put them in the main chat, and sorry, I should have said this earlier. You can put your questions into the main chat, or if you would like, you can message Room 1 CSC, and they will kind of forward it on to me if you don't want to be identified as the person who is asking the question. Perfect. All right. So how can we help specifically for yourselves? So that advisory process is really focusing in on what a personal appointment looks like. So a personal appointment is where you are one of the individuals who is directly involved in an incident. So again, that is scheduling your intake appointment and exploring the options that are right for you. What I think might be quite helpful for yourselves to understand, because you have that kind of pastoral role, a position of authority and responsibility within your societies, consultations may be quite helpful for yourselves in terms of how we can best help you. And a consultation is where you're not directly involved in the specific incident or the behavior. So you are not the person who is affected by the issue, and you're not the person who's causing the concern. But you have potentially got someone who has disclosed to you. And again, you are very likely to be trusted people within your groups and your societies. So it is potentially likely that people will be disclosing to you about their experiences, and they may be seeking help from you. So that may happen and you may say, okay, cool, I really want to help, but I'm actually not super sure of what the options are or what's the best course of action. So in that case, what you can do is you can schedule a consultation appointment. And a consultation is where we look at, okay, well, what are the different resolution options? What can you do? What's in the remit for you to do? And then how can you direct the next person? So how can you signpost the person that you're supporting? How can you help them to find the resolution that works best for them? Really important to note with consultations that they are not reporting on behalf of someone else. We do not accept reports on behalf of another individual. And again, I'll go into more detail as to why that happens and why we're really strict about that in a little bit more, in a couple more slides. And then another option there is our referrals. So again, this is really just, it's referrals, it's signposting. It's just letting someone know that we exist. Because again, we are a relatively new service. We opened in April of 2024. So they may not be aware that we exist. They may be new to the university as well. They may not know that we exist. So let them know that we are here and what we can do in terms of helping them. You might even show them how to book an appointment, show them where the booking form is, even sit with them while they fill out the booking form. But remember, it is completely their choice to engage with the DRNC. It is absolutely their choice in terms of the next steps that they take. It is their experience and they should be in full control over what happens next. If they want to engage in a resolution or not, they should be the ones to make that choice. So now, in terms of the scope, so I suppose this is, for us, it's important to recognize where we can help and where you guys can help and where the boundaries around that. So what we can do is we can help with managing reports and complaints. We can help with, I suppose, getting access to different resolution processes, to proceeding into investigations. All of that stuff is within the scope of our service of what we can do. Now, we don't ourselves conduct the investigations. That would go into the different offices, either the office of the junior dean or the employee relations team. And again, it may be conducted in terms of investigations, may be conducted by one of those individuals, or it could go to a different member of university staff or to an external investigator, depending on the case. But what you can do is understanding about peer-to-peer support, to signposting different support services, raising awareness of acceptable behaviours and unacceptable behaviours, and training. So when we look at the peer-to-peer support, again, that is sometimes, and we often get these questions of, well, someone comes to me and I want to be able to help them. So how do I do that? And it's also in recognition that, okay, well, this person is seeking support and they deserve a level of support from someone who's trained and from someone who is a professional in the area so that they can get the full level of support that they deserve. So that's what we can do. We can be a listening ear. We have more training available for yourselves, and I'll go into more detail in a little bit on what that kind of looks like in terms of how you can be the best support, peer-to-peer supporter in terms of responding to disclosures. Then we have our raising awareness, our signposting of different support services, and our training. Again, you don't have to be the ones to deliver that training. We will be bringing in, very excitingly, we have 2 online modules which will be made available to yourselves. I'll speak to that in a little bit more detail later on. And we will also be having a full suite of in-person trainings made available. But so if we look at this and we say, okay, well, look, this is what you guys are going to do as committee members for your society. And then this is what we're going to do as the DRNC service. So we will manage the reports and the complaints. We will manage the resolution process and we will manage the investigations. And if we can all do that together, then we will hopefully be promoting a positive, safe and inclusive community together. So then to build on that in terms of the scope of what we can do, I just wanted to go through a little bit in terms of some of the limitations and the impacts of our actions. So natural justice, anonymity, and a survivor-centered approach are 3 of the key things that come up for us in our consultations, in our appointments, and when we deliver training like this. So I want to give an opportunity to kind of go through that and really understand what that means and why we act and do the things that we do. So natural justice it's a set of legal principles. It is not unique to the DRNC. It is not unique to the university, but they are principles that govern all of our actions and most of our decisions, really, in terms of when we're managing a case. And the principles of natural justice are there to provide a fair process with unbiased treatment. So we need to make sure that we are fair to everyone, that we are not biased, and that we follow the process in a way that aligns to this. Because if we don't follow this process, if we don't adhere to natural justice, then we're not being fair to either party involved, because a case could be overturned if it didn't follow the principles of natural justice. If there wasn't a fair process, if there was biased treatment, then we haven't done our jobs right, and that case could be overturned. So we may have gone through a whole process, and if we don't follow all of the steps and adhere to all of the rules that are set out in these legal principles, then that may it may cause more harm in the long run to all parties. The next one here, we have anonymity. So we would often get questions about anonymous reporting. Can we make anonymous reports? Can we take and accept anonymous reports? And the answer is no. So there are huge limitations in terms of anonymous reporting. And that is linked into our natural justice principles. So one of the principles in terms of natural justice is, the right to know and understand and to hear and to receive the complaint that's made about you. So in order to do that, you have to be able to know who it is who's made that complaint. In order for us to follow a process, we would have to have both parties available to, go through their experience and talk through, because again, and we work within our system from a policy perspective, we work on the balance of probabilities. So again, in order to engage fully in a process, we have to have a named individual to make that complaint. Now, it can be really difficult, and we totally appreciate that there are huge barriers in terms of reporting. And again, we do a lot of work in terms of trying to figure out how we can mitigate those barriers. So we do accept and understand that there are barriers to making a named report, but we cannot accept anonymous reports. Then our survivor-centered approach. So survivor-centered approach is something that we take really seriously in the service, and it's something that we, again, governs most of our decisions and our actions. And this is where we try and put the survivor first at every step of the process. So this, again, is one of the things. So when we talk about not accepting bystander reports or reporting on behalf of another individual, we can't do this because it's not the choice of the individual or the survivor. So if we were to take a bystander report or take a report on behalf of somebody else, the person who may have experienced that negative behavior would have to be called in as a witness to talk about their experience and to be questioned about their experience in an investigation. So we never want to create a situation where we are taking more power and control away from an individual who may have experienced harm, abuse, or violence. So it has to be that individual's choice as to whether they wish to proceed with an investigation. They need to have a full understanding of what's involved. They need to have, accurate expectations of what's involved, and to be able to make an informed choice. So again, we try, insofar as all of our decisions and our actions, to put the survivor first, and to really embed that survivor-centered approach into our work. If we don't want to do any of that, if you don't want to get into any of those processes, we do have Speak Out. And I know I've just said we don't do anonymous reporting, and now I'm talking about anonymous reporting. But Speak Out is a very particular tool which allows us to do anonymous reporting. And that is because it is fully anonymous. So we can do anonymous reporting where we don't name the person who is causing concern. So Speak Out is fully anonymous in that we have no capacity or capability to identify the individual who is making the disclosure or report through Speak Out, We have no capacity or capability to identify the person who the concern is raised about. So when we talk about speak out, and in this context, we can use the terminology perpetrator because it's completely outside of a process. So the principles of natural justice don't apply to this because we're not going through a process. We're not going into, I suppose, any form of investigation or disciplinary process. This is very, very separate. So we can use terminology like perpetrator, and the term perpetrator is used within the speak out tool. So what this is really is it's a space for all members of our community to report their experiences of bullying, cyberbullying, harassment, discrimination, hate crime, coercive behavior and control, stalking, assault, sexual harassment, sexual assault, or rape. And we do this, it's a series of tick box questions and answers. At the end of that, on the basis of what an individual has submitted, you will also be provided with a bespoke list of support services. And that's on the basis of the answers that you've given throughout the form and throughout the tool. So that would be, for example, if you disclose something related to transphobia or transphobic abuse, then that might be, we would direct you to TENI, potentially. If you're disclosing or reporting something to do with, say, something has happened in your campus accommodation, then we may direct you to the accommodations office. So that's kind of what happens in the background in terms of providing support to the individual through Speak Out. Again, really, really important to note that it's not starting a process. There will be no follow-up. We do not have any idea who the individuals are. It is purely for accessing those support services. But then also for us, we do a lot of work in the background in terms of understanding the data that comes through that and understanding the trends of people's experiences. So I suppose one example of how we might use that is there's questions in there around, have you made a report to your college, a formal report? If yes, what enabled you to do that? And if no, what prevented you from doing that? So what we can figure out here is what are the enablers and the barriers to accessing these formal processes so that we can better understand that as a university and as a service so that we can try and mitigate those barriers and really improve on those enablers. And again, that's a really important piece for us in what we can do. We'll also monitor the trends of behaviors that people are experiencing so that we can tailor our specific trainings to be able to address the needs of our communities. So that's Speak Out. Where to find us and where to find the DRC service. So you can email us at drc@tcd.ie. We are based on the ground floor of House 48 and House 51, which is down at the back of the rugby pitch by the Samuel Beckett Theatre. And then we also have our website, and our booking form is available on our website as well. We do, excitingly, have a little bit of training coming down the line. So this module is now currently available to you all. So if you log into Blackboard and click on the modules tab on the left-hand side of the screen, go into your module catalog, which is on the top right-hand corner of the next screen, type consent into the search bar. You can select a module and that module, and you can enroll and partake in that. So this is about a 30 to 40 minute self-directed e-learning module. At the end, you will also be provided with a certificate, which will have your name on it. This is something that is now available to all students across the university. And as such, all members of your committees and your societies as a whole. So again, it's up to yourselves how you wish to utilize this in terms of what you want to do as a society. So I know we've heard that some societies might be looking at, running specific events where in order to get a ticket to that event, you have to have done this training, you have to provide your certificate. Could also be something that's utilized, because I know a lot of the times we get asked to do training around, I suppose, pre-trip training when you guys go on trips. It could again be a kind of a prerequisite to get a ticket for that trip that you have to show your certificate that you have completed this training. So again, really, really helpful resource. We also have another module that will be made available to yourselves as committee members, which is about responding to sensitive disclosures in a trauma-informed manner. This is predominantly geared towards staff, but we, in recognition of I suppose, the role of responsibility that you have as those trusted people within your societies, we thought it would be really, really helpful to offer that out to yourselves. So I know the CSC will be sharing details of how to access that module as well. We will then also, over the course of the next, I suppose, month or so, we will be recruiting a panel of student ambassadors who we will be training to deliver peer-led training. So what we're hoping is that we will have then a system through which you guys can request training on a needs basis. We'll have kind of a menu of training that's available, and there will also be scope for you to ask for potentially bespoke training, and based on our capacity, we may be able to deliver that for you. But again, the hope is that we can, I suppose, deliver more on a needs basis, the types of trainings that you want and that you need to best serve your communities. And also what's really exciting about that is that we have funding that we can actually pay the students who will be on our panel, because you all deserve to be paid for all of the fantastic work that you do. So that's kind of drawing us to a close on this. So a reminder that creating a positive and safe culture is everybody's responsibility, and we in the DRNC are here to help. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Fuelan, if I could ask you to stop the recording.